Recording. So this evening's chat, Catherine wanted me to just come in here and chat a bit about teaching online, because I think that is a very big reality or a big reality of one of the things you guys will be navigating when you leave this training, especially when we're kind of in this limbo phase, although we are starting to do a little bit more online, in person, there's a very large percentage of people that are teaching online. So I just want to kind of gauge from a show of hands. Obviously, it doesn't apply to our online trainees because the answer is definitely yes. But for those joining us in studio, have you done an online class before, whether it's via Zoom or pre-recorded?
Yes.
Yes, you guys have practiced. Cool. So we're going to chat a bit about what that experience is like on the teacher's point of view. And you're welcome to make a couple of notes. This is just a chat with some of the tips that I've had both teaching online classes and also being on the receiving end of online classes. Maybe things I would have liked the teacher to have done, or things to think about when you are planning your online classes. So this is more if you guys go out there, and I think that regardless, I don't know. I think that we are moving slowly back to in person, but I also have this gut feeling that online is here to stay. I think the convenience of it for a lot of people is still quite high. And so I know for myself, just before this class, I did something online because it's quick and easy. I don't have to drive somewhere. And so it is, from a business point of view, very useful for you as teachers to have some online resources. But if you go into purely teaching online, maybe this is something to consider in terms of starting out teaching, because I think this whole year is going to be a whole lot of waves and uncertainty. And if I can just start with a bit of experience of what we all went through as yoga teachers in the start of lockdown, there was almost, I mean, there was always online yoga, there was always YouTube, there was always some platforms like Allo Yoga, Glow. I don't know if you guys have tried any of those, but there was always online available. But in studio always triumphed. People always preferred in studio because it was a little bit more personable. You got the experience of being in a shared yoga space. And then when lockdown happened, the whole yoga world went, whoa, what are we going to do? And so there was this massive influx of online offerings. And I kid you not, if I go back a year, there was, oh my gosh, hundreds of teachers offering online yoga, which is tricky because when we teach in person, we can easily identify our target market by who's in our area. But now we were all sharing a target market. So a lot of teachers did really well in terms of their offering. And a lot of teachers struggled quite a lot because, you know, people were now trying everyone's classes because you could. And I did the same. I tried teachers in Joburg. I tried teachers overseas, which is incredible. There was no restrictions in terms of who could come to your classes. So what I'm seeing at the moment is that it's probably about 50-50. I'm seeing studios that are operating at 50% capacity because of current regulations in South Africa. That might be different all over the place. But simultaneously offering online like what we're doing in studio. And the hardest thing that you'll have to navigate as a teacher is pretty much the technical side of things. And Catherine will probably laugh because we have grown leaps and bounds in terms of our skill set requirement of a yoga teacher. Suddenly it's not just teaching yoga anymore, it's managing Zoom, technical abilities. Do you have the sound equipment, over and above all the other roles we take on as teachers too, being our own marketing advisor, accountant, and so on. So I'm going to give you guys just a bit of insight into some things to consider if you guys want to teach online, and then we can take some questions if you guys want to tackle specific things. Is there anyone who's maybe thinking about starting some online classes after? Because Inka, you wanted to do kind of whole like the traveling all around locuming vibe. Cool. Anyone else? Maybe. Okay, cool, Lily. All right. So for the rest of you, take notes anyway, because maybe someday in the future, I mean, even in the winter now, we might go into stricter lockdown. And I think it's still something that's really useful for you guys in terms of building up your own confidence in teaching if you're teaching family and friends. So when we think just in terms of mediums of teaching, you can either do online classes in two ways. So the first way is pre-recorded, where essentially what you guys are doing with your teaching pracs, right? You set up your Zoom camera, you put yourself up on your mat, you teach a class, and then you either upload it to YouTube or a website where you can make it in terms of a membership, or you can sell it, all right? So that's one way to do it, pre-recorded. And then the other way is to do it live. So I would say that Zoom is definitely the most popular platform, but a lot of teachers use different things, and it really comes down to what you're looking for. So some teachers will do things on Instagram live, which I have found is really cool for shorter videos, like 20-25 minute things. But in terms of longer classes, I mean, a phone screen is so tiny, you can't really see much anyway. But the benefit, if you do anything on Instagram, people can easily stream into your live, and you can save that class to your Instagram TV. So it means people can come back to it at any time. Okay. And I know the teacher I did my yoga training with in Pretoria, he did a lot of live classes on Facebook, and he saved those classes to his Facebook page. So it kind of works in the same way, where you stream live and save the class afterwards, so that you can still make it available to people if they can't make that particular slot. So the challenges with both of them, in terms of when you're doing things live, and we've experienced it, just be prepared. There may be something technical that goes on, a glitch. Maybe your Wi-Fi is not streaming as well as what you want it to. So I've noticed in the last year, people have become a little bit more forgiving to technical issues. I think we've all experienced it now. We know it's out of our control. We know there's not much we can do. So people are generally relaxed about it. But there's a sense of comfort that comes with platforms. Sense of comfort that comes with platforms like Zoom or pre-recording, that you can pretty much have a little bit more control over it. Okay, so with any live, the biggest advice I can give to you is to go through a test run of sorts, whether that means you've got a friend that is going to sign on the other side, just to check your sound and video quality. Because I think even in online class, we're still selling a product. So if there's any way in which we can make that as good as we can, I mean, it doesn't have to be massive cinematography in terms of high-end quality camera and microphones, but as long as they can see and hear you. Because I've been in a number of classes, even Zoom classes, where it sometimes comes down to the echo in that room. You know, what's happening in that studio space. Empty big spaces like studios, especially wooden studios, the echo is so strong that it doesn't quite relay in terms of the recording, and it can be really difficult for someone to hear on the other side. So I've seen a lot of teachers, for those who have earpods, whether it's actually the earpods or alternative Bluetooth speakers or earphones, those have worked really well because they kind of have a built-in mic in them. And so that has helped a lot in terms of making sound quality audible and clear. But generally, just do a test run and see if you can make sure you can see you can hear yourself, and before you sign up for anything. Okay, so just give it a little bit of a trial, because you don't want to be fiddling on the day of the class trying to figure out what will happen. And then in terms of visuals, obviously, just exactly like we've said to everyone online, set yourself up, preferably, I know we're quite limited with space, but if it's possible, a clear space where limited distraction in the background. It helps to have lighting source from behind the camera, so you're pretty much facing a window or a light source, because backlighting like that will always bring a little bit more contrast, and with better lighting comes better quality, at least on Zoom. So in terms of what was I going to say? In terms of the lighting, yeah, those are just small little things to consider. I think you guys have seen this week, when I asked you to send some pictures or videos, you said, oh, I'm not quite sure if you can see it clearly because I'm wearing like black leggings and maybe a black top and a black mat. And you realize how difficult it is for you to see yourself in the screen. The same thing happens for your students. I've been in a class before where the teacher was wearing really pants and there was a lot happening in the background, and I actually couldn't see what she was doing, because as soon as you make it two-dimensional, it's really hard to see what's going on. So even something as simple as wearing something plain, having a plain background, just pretty much brings a little bit more contrast. And those are things we can control. We can make ourselves as clear as possible. We can wear clothing that we feel and set up the environment that we feel will obviously showcase the video the best. Okay, that's just simple things, and I think they actually do make the world of a difference in terms of the person's experience on the other side. We know that sometimes that's not achievable. Sometimes we're teaching from our house and there's like a bed in the corner, and that's fine. Sometimes you have to make do with what you've got. And so in that moment, if you're limited with space, decide how much you are going to demonstrate, if at all, and how you're going to navigate that. Okay. In fact, I would almost recommend everyone who teaches to try teaching an online class, because it's essentially the opposite of everything we tell you in studio. Okay. So when we had our training happening at the time of lockdown, we were teaching everyone to not demonstrate, to use your cues, to move around the room. And then everything happened online, and we said, oh, okay, cool. So stay still, demonstrate, and just make sure your students know what's going on. Okay, so it is essentially the opposite of what we're telling you, but it's we've had to make it work. Any questions at this point, just with regards to those few little technical things? None.
All good.
Cool. So coming to the teaching section of it, if I think about our teaching practicals, and I don't think this is impossible. I think you can definitely teach an online class without demonstrating the whole class. You need to find your own balance of it. Because if I'm looking at you guys at the moment, even if you're looking at the grid screen, you'll see everyone's block is pretty small, all right? And so although we know when we're doing our online sessions, you guys have placed the camera quite far away from you so I can see your whole mat, but you will have experienced that observing me on a tiny screen far away is more challenging for you. So when you teach online, you might see that your students prefer having their laptop closer, which means you can't see them. You can see like a hand or a foot, or it's evening time, and so you're just seeing shadows. So be prepared to know that you may not be able to see your student the whole time. If you're teaching a smaller group, like 1 or 2 people, I might request that they set up their mat in a certain way. If there's something specific you want to work on, let's say you're doing a peak pose to crow, just say, cool, I would love to come in and check on you guys during the practice. So if you can set up your mat so that I can see it on the screen, that would be great. You'll have a lot of students that will just keep their videos off, and you can't control that. So if they don't want to be seen, that's fine. So if it's a private or a small group, it's fine to ask them to set up in a certain way. I think it's totally okay if there's anything specific you guys want to see as a teacher that's only going to enhance their experience of the class. Whether they want to do that or not is completely up to them. Okay, so when we, if you guys are teaching online, besides the setup and have the sound sorted and everything like that, when we come to actually teaching the class, I've been in a couple of classes, and I'll give you my 2 experiences. I did a couple of free classes, as in the teacher was offering them for free, and I attended, and they just demonstrated the whole class. They stayed on the mat the whole time, and they pretty much practiced with me while they were explaining the class. Okay, which I didn't mind so much because it was a free class and it was also a part of their learning as one of their teacher trainings. Okay, but I've also been in a class where someone was charging quite a larger amount, more than sometimes what I pay in a studio, and they were doing the same thing, and I felt like they could have checked in on me a little bit more. So one of my ways in which I think you can navigate that, besides really focusing on your cues to make them as clear and concise as they can, is to set yourself up in a way where you have certain moments that you can come and check in on your students. So let's say I'm leading them through a flow on one side, and then maybe on the second side, or once I've repeated a pose a couple of times, I can come up to the camera like this and say, oh, cool, nice, Amy, and have a little bit of individual feedback. It might even be that due to the nature of your class, you can only do that when you get to the peak pose, which is also great. Cool, check in with them. Great, guys. Now what we're gonna do is crow pose. Have a look at me. I want you guys to watch what I'm doing. Once I have done the pose, I'm gonna sit here and watch you guys and give you some input. So weave in a little bit more teaching that still makes it individualized. I think you can still find that balance. I don't know, for you guys who have done online classes, have you had any teachers that have done that? None. It's hard for us as teachers. That's why they haven't done it, because it's really hard. I don't know what your experiences from online classes have been. Have you just kind of watched the teacher demoing and you just, yeah.
The one day that I've done was actually on the Jeff online gym. And the way this is being done is that the teacher is in contact with the students before the class on the chat. So she talks to the camera and she receives the messages on the chat, and it's actually on Facebook, I think, that the messages come through. So then she chats to the students and she presents the entire class. She demonstrates the whole class, and then she chats to the students again on the chat. And that is the contact that you get with the teacher. So that was my experience down here in South Africa.
I think that's what I do like about that, is to start a Zoom meeting 15 minutes before or something like that, because I think what a lot of students love about a yoga studio, it's not only the yoga class, but that little bit of connection before and that little bit of lingering after. I know I love that about studio spaces. And so making yourself available for any questions or any people who just want to check in and see how you're doing. I think that's nice to have a little bit of interaction, whether it's in a chat or a video, and that's completely fine. If you are, we cannot fully avoid demonstration on online, because I can't see whether you can see what I'm doing. And so we use that as a coping tool, if I can say like that. We use it as a tool to show students what they need to do, so we avoid confusion on their side. So it's just another way of making our class super duper clear. But also bear in mind that teaching while you're talking is hard. It's really, really, really hard. I've been teaching a couple of classes that are pre-recorded for a platform called Yoga Connect, and I'm exhausted after teaching a 35-minute class, because you want to showcase it well, but you also want to give clear instructions. And just like we say when you're demoing in class, when you're in a down dog or when you're facing the back of the mat, sometimes your students can't hear you because you're facing in the other direction of the laptop. And these are all things that we need to kind of navigate. So what I found that works the best is to figure out or to develop a sequence that is going to help you in your sequencing. So it's going to ensure that you are facing the camera the whole time. Okay. Now we've done a couple of flows where we kind of like mandala flows, so circular flows around the mat. So I want you to imagine, you say to everyone, okay, I want you to set up with your camera facing the long edge of your mat, so just as you guys have done online. And I want you to sit so that the camera's on your right. So you have it sounds like a little bit specific, but you do that with intention so that when you're teaching, everyone's facing the same direction, which is going to make your life easier. But let's say I'm in a down dog. If they step their left foot forward and do warrior 2, they're looking at the screen. Then you might come into triangle. You can move through your wide-legged forward fold. Maybe you do low lunge to the other side. Open up warrior 2 on the right. And so you've taken them through a half circle flow that they're looking at the camera the whole time. Because as you'll see, it's such a small little thing. You don't have to do it all the time, but it avoids students coming into a warrior 2 and looking over their shoulder like this and trying to look under their legs to see you on the camera. It's so easy to create a sequence that is going to help your students in that flow. And it's simple. It just means you're going to spiral to the back of the mat. You can go back into down dog and step the other leg forward, and you just move front, back, but regardless of what you do, they're always facing the camera. I think that's pretty cool. I don't know if you've seen it before. It's super helpful, and you can see them and they can see you, and it's pretty easy. Any questions about that at this point? No. Cool. The other thing I wanted to kind of just build on in terms of when I'm going to say you will end up demonstrating more than usual. If you watch those classes with Laura, in fact, those were actually pre-recorded, meaning she didn't have students on Zoom. You can, I mean, even in some of our classes, we had to demonstrate a little bit more in the first time we did a sequence because everyone was pretty new, everyone was learning the sequence. But then the second time I did the sequences, I could demonstrate a lot less because the students knew me, I knew them, and I could watch them a bit more. So if you're working with a core group regularly, you can definitely take a step back, have a seat, and just instruct them verbally, especially when you get to know them, because you guys will become so good with your cues now after all your teaching practicals that you'll be able to instruct them just simply looking at them. I know Laura now, while she's been on maternity leave, she's continued teaching her privates online just verbally. So it's definitely possible. But if it's open classes, you will have someone that's joining you for the first time. And so helping, by demo is definitely going to help. But I would recommend even maybe 2 to 3 times in a class, coming to the camera, checking in, whether it's those pauses in child's pose or downward dog, or whether it's between flows or before the peak pose. Take a moment to check in with them. You would do that in a class, make it a little bit more personable. I think it'll set you apart from a lot of the other online offerings at the moment, where they can also get to know you. Cool. So in terms, then lastly, I know these are kind of obvious things, but we know that not everyone has all the props that we might have at home. So if you are teaching with props, always give your students alternatives. So if you are doing a class where you start on your back in Supta Padangusthasana, so your supine hamstring stretch, you might say to them to have a non-stretch scarf, or to get something similar at home that they can use as an alternative. It's the exact same thing, the same experience. If you are planning on using a block, then this is tricky because sometimes people would say books, and I know Loretta, on that one session you had a stack of books for your half moon, but you can't easily move a stack of books around between your poses. So be really clever about the type of sequence you teach, and if you are sequencing with props, give them an alternative. If people don't have a bolster, it's super easy. They can just grab a really hard pillow at home. It's not a problem. But for blocks, that one's always, it's a little bit of a tricky one. Sometimes I tried cueing people with like a Tupperware, but then I was like, Tupperwares aren't even that good. It's not easy. A what?
Big like cooking pot.
Ah, that's pretty cool. But then if you're using, depends what you're using it for. So if I was using it underneath my hand for like standing splits or half moon, that's fine. But if I was doing supported bridge, if I was doing supported bridge, I could just use a pillow. It would give me a similar experience, maybe just less sturdy. But we try to accommodate. You might have a whole group of students who have their own props, and it's not a problem. But you just take deliberate thought as to what you're teaching. And even if you're teaching something like crow pose, set it up in a way that you can see them, you can explain where we're going, you can help them out, and take it from there. Okay. Then obviously we have our Shavasana. Okay. Now Shavasana is super, super tricky online because, and I was actually on a workshop, I did a course last weekend where they were saying, and it was a recorded Zoom meeting that I was catching up on later. And someone said, oh, in Shavasana, it was really quiet. So I didn't know whether my signal cut out or whether we were just being quiet. So they kept checking on their screen the whole time. And so it was really, really difficult for them to know whether they had lost signal or whether the teacher was just being quiet. And I thought, I've experienced that before. And so one way to kind of navigate that is to have on the teacher's side, very soft music playing in the background. Now Zoom is interesting. If I play music off my laptop and I talk, sometimes it distorts. Okay. But I can play like a little speaker in the background that's just maybe like soft nature sounds that is loud enough that Zoom will pick it up, but also won't distort my voice. So if a sound is too soft, Zoom will block it out. So if I do a yoga class online where there's any chanting or humming or singing bowls, Zoom, it gets to like quite a low sound volume where Zoom cuts it out. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard that before, but it'll be like singing bowl will be like, and then it'll go like some weird distort the sound thing. And then it creates quite a weird experience on the user's side because it distorts and muffles the sound. So I think that if you have music on your side that you're playing from a separate device, and it's got to be quite a moderate sound and you can check in with them, then that actually works quite well for them to know that. But you don't have to teach with music at all. In fact, you can just check in with them and say, cool, give enough cues and not leave minutes of silence where they wonder whether they have lost you or not.
So sorry, I was gonna say, sorry guys, I have various people in my background. I was doing an online thing with a friend just out of interest because she was like, oh, she's in England and whatever. And then at the end she was like, why is there no music? Like, isn't yoga and music like together? And I never thought about it. And then I was doing other online classes, they were like art classes, and they would just send you a SoundCloud link. And they would just say like, I've made an hour playlist that goes with the flow. If you want to play it, you're welcome to play it. And then you also know like your 10 minutes of Shavasana, if the Zoom thing cuts out, your playlist will end when the hour's done. So I thought that was quite nice because some people like it, don't. And then it means like you can play it as loud as you want at home or not at all. So I just thought if anyone else does teach online, that was like, I was like, light bulb moments.
I really like that. I've been in classes where the teachers will send me a Spotify link. So they'll send me a playlist and I can play both them and my Spotify playlist through my laptop at the same time, but I can monitor the adjustments. So I can put the Spotify louder or softer in terms of playing them both. But I don't have a Spotify paid account. I've got a free account. So I'll be doing yoga and then there'll be an ad that'll come on and I've got to sit through the 30-second advert, which is quite annoying. But that's the reality, that's on them, right? So the same thing with YouTube. If you send them a YouTube playlist and then they get ads and then it's like monday.com, and you're like, come on, I'm just trying to do my yoga here or something silly. So
SoundCloud has no ads.
SoundCloud, I never thought of that. So SoundCloud's definitely a good one. And also say to students, like, play what music you like in the background, because I think it's cool that students can play whatever they like, but I haven't tried SoundCloud, so I'm definitely going to take that advice. So yeah, I think that's a cool one. Thanks, Inka. That's awesome. Cool. Any other questions about specific online, whether it's using social media platforms or using Zoom? If there's anything, I think we could speak so much about it, but I just actually wanted to give you guys a bit of a taster and just of things to think about. And if you had any specific questions, we can navigate them particularly. Ange.
This is kind of related. I wanted to ask you what you thought when you're doing a pre-recorded or even a Zoom class of preparing the students for what you're going to do, as in telling them what the peak pose is or what kind of strength you're going to be building. Because I find that when I'm going through YouTube and finding teachers, I press play and then they start talking and talking and talking, and then I'm like, okay, no, next video, because they're just telling me all of the stuff I don't want to hear. I'm on my mat, I'm ready, but at the same, I don't know if it's not, maybe some people don't like starting a yoga class going in the dark. So I don't know what you would say there. What would your advice be?
I like knowing what I think for most people online, pre-recorded specifically, because I'm going to a pre-recorded because I want to choose what I want to practice, right? So in one of the platforms I teach Yoga Connect, which is 6 South African teachers, but also when I've been members, if I've had a membership with Allo Moves, I always like that I could choose whatever class I wanted to do, right? So whether that is something you say or whether it's something you give in the write-up, I think that's totally fine. So I remember at the start of lockdown, I pre-recorded a couple of classes and I always gave a little bit of an intro because for me, it was important that they knew whether, I told them the peak pose if there was one. Some, like if it was a yin class, I didn't have a peak pose, but I also wanted them to be prepared as to what the style of yoga was because I had no control over who was attending. in your Zoom class, you can see people, you can check in, cool, anyone doing yoga for the first time, those type of things. With a pre-recorded, you have no idea who's on the other side. So I tried to keep it under a minute. And I just pretty much introduced myself. I told them what it was. So is this a vinyasa class, or is this a restorative class? Or I think I even did a chair yoga class. And then after that, I told them, I didn't have to tell them the duration because they can see that very easily. I would stipulate whether there was any props that they needed, but then I would always say, if you don't have props, it's not a problem. You don't need them. Okay. But just know that if you have them, you can have them handy. And then I would stipulate whether I felt the class was beginner friendly or for more intermediate practitioners, which for me was only important because in some more intermediate classes, you move through cues quite quickly. So you might say high lunge, warrior two, reverse warrior, without stipulating what's happening in the arms or the legs in the transition. So I would give less cues, which means students would need to have some familiarity with the poses. And so in a studio, you could figure that out. You will be able to see whether they need more or less cues in terms of what you observe. So that was something I did, which is not necessary. If you're teaching it depends on your unique style. I think that one intermediate class I did was 8 angle. And I knew if this was someone's first class, don't think they're going to be wanting to do 8 angle. So let's rather maybe try this class, which is more general, all levels, lots of cues, lots of instructions. And so I like to grade it in terms of how much instruction is given. But that was my personal preference because I knew I only did a handful of classes. I knew I didn't know who was on the other side. But if you have your own unique style and you say, this is the type that I offer, this is how my classes work. I give a lot of cues. I give a lot of instructions. We move slowly, we move precisely. And then that's your general style. If you offer more than one different type of yoga, then I would stipulate this is a maybe faster style, this is a more restorative style. But you don't have to say it. You can put in the write-up too, or in the class description. And it depends where you're making your class available. If it's on YouTube, then it's pretty easy to write enough of a description in it. Cool. Niga?
I have a question. I've been teaching university classes because that's what we do as assistants, and over the past year. And one thing that I've struggled with is how to deal with students not wanting to leave their camera on. And yeah, it's kind of tricky because on the one hand, it's their right not to want to have their camera on, and it's, you know, we're also invading each other's private spaces with Zoom. And then at the same time, I find it difficult as an instructor to stay motivated when I'm only seeing these names and I'm not even sure, is there someone behind that block, or is that person gone? Are they even listening to me anymore? Are they completely bored, or what? It's difficult.
Oh, there's very little engagement, and you don't get non-verbal cues. In a class, you can see, okay, they're all tired, give them a child's pose, you know. We lose that, but I think on someone on the receiving end, they know that. They know that I've been on a class and I did, especially in lockdown, I did a lot of online classes, and I always purposefully left my video on because I always felt bad just having your name and your block there. But there would also be times when I was doing a class and I would just take a child's pose and I would just leave them. And then I think students are more open to doing what they want that serves them because they're in their space. All right. So you're there to guide them through it. So yes, the morale and the motivation is really tricky. So how I would navigate that is, if I started a class, I would say, I would love for you guys to keep your videos on. That way I can observe you certain times during the class and check in with you guys. However, if you're not comfortable with that, just know that it's totally fine. You can switch it off, but just know that I can't see you and I can't give you any personalized instruction, or if any. And I think some people are happy with that. They're so happy to take a step back and go, great, I don't actually want the teacher to watch me. I'm doing this for me. And that's fine. You'll get different types of students in the group. But that also just kind of reminded me of something else. If you are recording the session, I always like to tell the students that the session has been recorded. So the one way in which you can do that is if you guys, so let's quickly just take a step back for Zoom. If you guys are looking at teaching on Zoom, if you have a free account, you're limited to 45 minutes, okay? If you're 3 people or less, it's free for however much time you want. But as soon as you're more than 3 people, it'll cut you off at 45 minutes. Okay. So you need to pay to upgrade. So for example, my Zoom account, a pro version, I think depending on the dollar, it's like 200 Rand, 250, I reckon. So sometimes what is helpful is while you're teaching the class, you might as well record it if you want to make it available afterwards. But for me, something I really consider is the privacy of the people practicing yoga and being recorded. So in a training setting, like just going back, we ask you guys to keep your videos on, we record it so everyone can see everyone. Feel this is more of an agreement space. Where in the class, I don't think a lot of people want to necessarily be recorded in the yoga practice, and then they have no control over where you're selling it, how are you distributing it. So 2 ways I like to navigate that is I would say to people, okay guys, I will be recording the session today. I just want to let you know that I will only be recording my screen for the duration of the 60-minute class, and I will stop the recording just after Shavasana. Once the recording is done, if you would like to talk, then they can. I mean, you can always crop the recording afterwards, but I think that also gave me a lot of ease in a class as to I'm being recorded and I have no idea where this recording is going, right? So that's just a personal thing for me. A lot of people don't really care. So all that you need to do, and this is hard because it means your Zoom is going to record what your screen is. Okay, so at the moment, my screen is a grid. So Zoom is recording a grid. Okay, if I spotlight my screen, do you guys see that it's made only me big if it wasn't like that already? And so it's only made me big on my screen too. So if I want to record only me, it means I need to be on my screen the whole time. So it means that you don't get to watch the others. So if that's the case, then what I would recommend doing is having a couple of classes that are specifically just you on the screen. You'll spotlight your own video and you'll be looking at yourself when you teach, and then have other ones that are more interactive where you might have a grid and chat to them. And so if you are recording, I just think it's preferable that you have only your screen. Also, if anyone's watching the recording, they want to watch you teach. So I mean, it's so easy to start your own Zoom meeting, teach into thin air, and then make that available and keep your live classes for those who attend. It's just one of those things to consider. The technical side of things is one of the hardest parts. Yeah, but yeah, so I think it depends on the size of your group and how many people you have. If you were teaching a private Naga, I would definitely say to them, please keep your video on. Otherwise, I don't know why they're doing a private, to be honest. It'd be a waste of their time. But I kind of let people have their free will. I also don't want to force them to do anything that they're not comfortable with, because I think that's also detrimental to them coming back ever. Cool. Any other questions that you guys have for teaching online? No. So actually, just because I think we only had 2 who are maybe keen to teach online, who's keen to teach in person after the training? Because always there's a few that are not quite ready to jump into teaching as yet. That's kind of why I'm getting. So everyone kind of prefers in person. Yeah. Okay. I would like you guys to also consider the dual option, which is what we're doing in studio, which is also pretty hard. All of it's hard. But because you want to try and give everyone equal attention, which is tricky. You want to attend to the people in the studio, but attend to people online. And so that's interesting to navigate. And so it's kind of just the same troubleshooting we went to in the studio. Okay, what is the setup where they can see me, maybe they feel involved, whether it's a workshop that's a little bit more interactive or just a class. So you're going to go through the same motions, and then you as a teacher, just set aside certain times to check in on the people online, to check in with the people in the studio, and to try and create a little bit more cohesion. It's tricky, but I think that if you're working with a group that's familiar with each other, it kind of formulates quite nicely over time. Okay, and I also want to say, sometimes the online world is super scary because it takes a lot of us to step out of our comfort zone as a teacher, because suddenly, I mean, I actually want to give this advice to anyone who's doing their teaching practical in studio. I would recommend that you do your teaching practical with your friend and record yourself on Zoom and watch yourself back. And that was something we've done with all our trainees in the last year because everything was online. And it was very difficult because it feels so awkward watching ourselves and listening to how we sound. But I think that once you kind of get over that hurdle, you feel a lot more comfortable in teaching, and you realize that it doesn't matter if you made a mistake or you said something funny, like it's relatable. You don't have to be perfect. And so you let go of any expectations. And I think that's quite freeing for us as teachers. We don't worry what we look like or sound like because we're just being who we are. And that's what people love about you. That's why they're there at your class. So watching ourselves back also teaches us a lot about our teachings. And then we don't become so nervous about teaching online anymore because we're used to seeing what we look like and hearing what we sound like. And it's also useful for us as a reflective tool, no matter how cringy it seems. You guys watched yourself back on your pose reviews. Did you feel like that's what it felt like? Did you look and go, oh, that's what that felt like?
I have to honestly say, I thought I was doing much better than I actually did. While doing the poses, I thought I was doing pretty well. And then watching the video, I realized, oh, there are all these details that you're not aware of at all. So
that's totally fine. I think it shows us like our body, and it's not so much as it's not supposed to be like a bad feedback to go, oh, it's not quite what it needs to be or anything like that. It's such a useful tool to go, oh, I didn't realize my back leg wasn't up in Warrior 3. Oh, in my mind, it feels like it's up. And one of my teachers from ages ago always said, take photos of yourself or video as you guys have done, because when you take photos and videos, you also want to send something that is good in terms of picture quality or whatever, but you work really hard towards it. So it teaches you a lot about understanding poses too. So from a teacher's perspective, it shows you that sometimes you think you're doing something, that's exactly what your students are experiencing too. So it helps us as a teacher really go, oh, maybe I'm saying lift the leg, and they're not doing it, maybe because they think it's lifted already. And you might walk past and say, no, tap their foot, lift it to here. Good, do you feel that? Yes, that's in line. And then they go, cool, I can't see my foot, so I have no idea what it's doing. So, and the exact same thing with your teaching practicals. Sometimes for some of you guys, I said, sometimes people use fillers. Now we're gonna. We don't hear it until we watch ourselves back, and then we just become more aware of it. So it's tricky at first, but I want to say don't be afraid of online. I think it's really useful. It's difficult for us, but the benefits in terms of connecting with people and making or getting yoga classes up and going is sometimes really easy. Whether that means you're meeting once a week with 3 of your friends just for a Zoom class, just so you can practice, whether you're charging them a regular fee or whether you're just teaching them for free. I think it's if you're not considering it, or if you're not considering classes, whatever you do in person or online, I'd recommend just teaching in terms of building up your confidence in teaching, because it's just practice and you guys will feel worlds apart in terms of other way that you do it. Cool. Sorry, Anne?
I wanted to say at the beginning of this chat, when you asked if we ever considered teaching online, I've only ever done yoga on YouTube ever. So for the whole year that I did yoga, I did one in class and then only on YouTube. So I always imagined that if I was teaching online, then I would do a pre-recorded entire class where it's just me. But I just suddenly realized that I could use Zoom, but I was terrified of Zoom before this course. I really didn't want to use Zoom, and now I feel really comfortable with it. So maybe that is an option, like you said, just with your friends to keep on and to see yourself more often. I think it's extremely helpful. So, and I've noticed I have a really annoying throat clearing thing when I get nervous. So in Catherine's video, I think I cleared my throat 300 times, and I tried to edit it out because it was annoying me. So something I shouldn't do if I get nervous.
We find we've got little like habits that we're not even aware of. One of our other students also used to do a sigh. She would breathe and then she would go, and it wasn't like she was bored or annoyed. It was just like one of her own little coping things. So when she's teaching her class, she kept going step to low lunge, like she was disappointed. Anyway, so we knew that was just her teaching style. But a little tip for Zoom is that So before we started teaching online, we did a whole lot of pre-recorded content using QuickTime. And QuickTime's usually an app you already have on your laptop, and you just do new movie recording and it records you. And so we did that for a long period of time, but the size of the file was ridiculous. It came up to like 5 gigabytes, and then you spend so much time trying to compress it, it didn't work. So what's wonderful about Zoom is that firstly, it reduces background noise. So you don't get that in the background that you get with normal recordings, which you will have to edit out later, which is hard. It also, you can, under your Zoom settings, under video, you can choose whether you want it to be HD or normal. HD is always nice in terms of if you want a better quality, but most of the time normal's okay. And also it naturally compresses the file, or it does it already, that it compresses it quite small, which makes it pretty easy to edit. So you can easily take your Zoom recording and put it into iMovie or Windows Movie Maker if you wanted to add a couple of things on there. And so what's also pretty cool is, I know on my laptop, although it's like got a fairly decent webcam, it's way better on my phone. So you might want to play around going, what does it look like if I record on Zoom with my phone as opposed to using my laptop? And you can always just transfer it to your laptop and put it wherever you want to, or edit it in any way. So I've definitely, in hindsight, where I've used other platforms before, Zoom has been way, way better. So use it. I mean, for you as a teacher, if I start a Zoom meeting and I record myself, there's no time limit. So it doesn't kick me out after 45 minutes if there's just one of me. So it's like a free recording software. Cool. Any other questions you guys have about online classes? None. Little thing, just a side note, if you ever record your classes and make them available on YouTube, you can either make them public, which is what we've done on our Wellness Connection page. You can also make them private, that it's only available to people whose email you give access to. Or you can put it as unlisted, which means if it's unlisted, if anyone who has that link can view it. So it's nice to have an unlisted one in terms of if people have paid for it, then you distribute the link only to people who have purchased it. So that's quite another cool little tip. But when you guys start teaching, it's not like we just disappear. And if you do have any questions about navigating something technical wise, whether it be your recording or maybe you have an idea and you don't know how to navigate it, just reach out to Catherine and I. We're so happy to share anything that's helped us, because we've learned a lot in terms of online trainings in the last year, and we're still learning every single time. So we're more than happy to share any of that advice with you guys. Cool. If there's no more questions, that's it for the day. Yeah. Cool, guys. I will see you guys on Sunday.